After looking into the change that is very apparent in our world, the change that is noticeable and quite easy to understand, we will now discuss what we call essential, substantial, or radical change. This is a change so deep and radical that the very essence of the being undergoing change no longer remains intact, but is transformed into something essentially different from what it was before. Essential change is the transition from one essential mode of being to another, a transition that results to a new kind of being from the same species or an entirely new being. But how can we explain these deep changes that are found in nature? How can we reconcile it with the internal unity of being, as explained in the principle of potency actuality or principle of continuity that Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas presented? What are the changing acts in an essential change? At the end of an essential change, a new essential mode of being is present. Like, for example, when you eat something, it is digested and is transformed into something else. And in order to reconcile this, it is therefore important to understand the principle of change that allows us to determine that this being is not that being, and this is what Aristotle calls the essential form of being. In an essential change, however, what happens is the transition from one essential form to another in the same underlying potential subject. But what is the subject that remains? Is it another substantial form, or is it an indeterminate principle? Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas argue that it cannot be another essential form, as this will destroy the intrinsic unity of being. Remember that essential form determines the being to be this essential kind and not another kind. Thus, following the principle that a being cannot be several kinds at the same time means it cannot possess more than one essential form at once. Therefore, to explain this dilemma, the unity despite the radical change should be some indeterminate, non-formal, or formless metaphysical principle. It must be some radically indeterminate or formless principle below all essential forms with a potential capacity to receive all essential forms, but with none of its own. This is what Aristotle calls pure potency or primary matter. It is the ultimate condition of possibility within beings in the universe. But Aristotle and Aquinas also explain that primary matter is something that is impossible to be discovered by modern science. It has no form of its own, is not of itself a determinate this or that. It can neither exist or be known by itself, but only as a metaphysical postulate, as the necessary co-principle of form. While it is something that is, but because human understanding relies on what is intelligible, then primary matter is the limit of the human intelligence. To some, primary matter has a static and dynamic function. The first function is the basic principle of individuation to distinguish individuals in the same species, where the same form is reproduced in distinct parts of extended matter. On the other hand, the second, or the dynamic function, is also the bond of unity between different forms in a process of radical change. Therefore, while form is the principle that differentiates man from other beings, like human as a human being and not something else, matter, on the other hand, is the principle that differentiates. It differentiates one human being from another, and the cause of the continuity and unity of the human being from birth to death, or from flesh to ashes.